Some may find the following disturbing. Discretion is advised.
Never before in the history of sports podcasts have two men brought you opinion and analysis like these two. They speak for a city that's desperate for wins and titles, not whining and travesty. You might not agree with what they have to say, but you'll defend their right to say it. Sports fans across the world, from Chicago, Illinois, this is the Mac and Reed Show.
What's happening, everybody? Welcome into another edition of the Mac and Reed Show right here on the Barroom Network. And remember to follow us on social media. Follow me at The Real Evan Mac. Follow Ross at Ross Reed. You can watch us live on YouTube. You might be doing so right now. You could also catch all our previous shows on Spotify, on iTunes, wherever you get your media. Remember to like, subscribe, tell a friend or two, and remember to chime in the comments if we've missed anything, any burning questions for either of us, like what's your least favorite LaCroix flavor? Mine's limoncello, which is just dog shit. Whoever invented it just deserves to be shot in the street. Hot take number one, Ross. We have a lot to get to on the show today. We'll be talking about the Bears at length as we're counting down the days towards the draft, and the combine is underway. We got the big uglies going and the edge guys going, linebackers. They're all working out and doing the 40, and I know Ross loves a good combine. We'll talk at length about potential, the potential for trading that number one pick for the Bears, what Ryan Poles had to say, and Matt Eberflus as they were talking to NFL Network today. We're talking about spring training and baseball and all the unusual new rules, but hopefully changing the game for the better that Rob Manfred and company have rolled out. We'll be talking about basketball, and then with in honor of Creed releasing this weekend. Is it tomorrow? Yeah, it's tomorrow, right?
Yeah, technically midnight tonight. If you're young and you can stay up, yeah.
Some people be doing that. Anyways, with that releasing another installment of, you would say, the Rocky franchise, but we're talking top 5 sports movies to cap the show. So, how you feeling, Ross? What's good?
I'm good. We're ready to kind of hunker down a little bit. We got to get that one last snow out of the year before we move forward to the spring. We call this in Chicago winter part 2. So you get a little teasing this week over the 50-degree weather, and then boom, we'll get like 7 inches of snow tomorrow. And hopefully this will be the last little bit of snow that we'll see for this season, and we can move forward to spring. So hopefully everybody stays safe over the weekend, stock up, tip your delivery drivers, your Uber drivers, and your stuff like that. If you're going to order food and whatnot, take care of those people and be safe.
It's been a mild winter, though.
It has been a mild winter. Yes. Yes.
Well, without further ado, Ross, let's get into it. Let's talk Bears.
Let's go.
And combine is underway, and we just saw I'm not even going to bother pronouncing the Northwestern kids, the defensive lineman running like a 4.5 40, one of the fastest times for a D lineman. But we're seeing everything around this edge class is being hyped up, especially now with how many prospects there are, and headlined by Anderson, and there's so many other good ones out there. But we're seeing them at the combine and all their workouts. But even before talking about those prospects and guys that the Bears would have their eyes on potentially, a lot of the consensus top pick for the Bears being Jalen Carter from Georgia. We got to talk about this. He was arrested on charges of reckless driving and racing for that incident, in the off season with that, with another Georgia staffer who unfortunately was killed behind the wheel.
And
so
a
he
teammate.
posted the bill, and they said he fully and the teammate. Yeah, exactly. In that other car, he wanted to be fully exonerated of any criminal wrongdoing. So the question is, Ross, and this obviously it leads into another sort of conversation. We know what he can do on the field, and all these scouts and coaches and people around college football and the NFL know that he can get there to the next level and is a game wrecker of sorts. But the question is for the Bears and many of the teams in need of a guy of Jalen Carter's strengths is, did this hurt his draft stock? And I'll turn it to you first to kind of chime in.
Yeah, I mean, first to say, two people lost their lives here, and I think that sometimes that this gets lost in the shuffle of this conversation and the conversation that has been had over the last couple of days. So, rest in peace to the young lady, the staffer. She was only 21 years old, and the young man, Jalen's teammate, Nolan Smith, also his teammate, who had an amazing 40 time in this draft. Had very eloquent words yesterday at the combine about losing a teammate in this tragic car crash. Now, as we address the situation, right, I think that Jalen Carter's draft stock obviously took a hit for multiple reasons. First thing is the incident, right? He was a young man. There's possibly alcohol involved. They did some drag racing. There was a crash. A couple of people lost their life. But the fact that he was behind the wheel in doing that, and also potentially alcohol involved, is one thing. The second thing is he left the scene. He left the scene, presumably, we don't know. This is all alleged at this point. He was probably intoxicated, didn't want to be caught, at the scene intoxicated, and he left the scene. And, a third part of it is he pretty much kept it quiet for the last couple of weeks. This was after the national championship game. This was the night of the national championship game, I believe. So we're about a month removed, more than a month. We're almost 2 months removed from that entire situation, and this now comes out. So that's three big red flags right there, right? And so, you put all that in a vacuum, and you say, yes, teams should be concerned about your character issues when you have three big flags, revolving that incident. He is being charged with 2 misdemeanors right now. He very well could have been charged with some kind of vehicular manslaughter. But luckily for him, he looks like he's going to be able to avoid that. He's only 21 years old, right? He's a young man. I hope and pray that for his sake that he can learn from this mistake and that he can go forward and be a better citizen, and those 2 lives were not lost in vain, and he can better himself going forward, right? That's my thoughts as a human being, as a grown man who also made stupid mistakes 20 years ago when I was 21 years old, and also as a father. And I look at a young man and I see kind of what he's going through and the pain he has to go through right now for that. The second part of it as it relates to football, right? And I think specifically with the Bears, and I think right now the Bears were realistically probably looking to draft him around the top 4 range. And I think right now, for the moment, that this probably takes him off their board, at least in the top 5 to top 10. I personally think it takes him. I think it takes him off their board completely, because we know this franchise led by the matriarch Virginia McCaskey, and the kids, the McCaskies. They usually have a hard stop on these kind of things, and they want high character football players in their program. I think back to Ray McDonald, who they kind of took a chance on him beginning of the Ryan Pace era, beginning of the Vic Fangio era. He had some transgressions. He had some more transgressions with the Bears. They promptly let him go. I even think back further than that, Tank Johnson, as we all remember, didn't play in the Super Bowl, right? You know about the guns thing, stuff like that. I just think at this point in time, the Bears specifically are done with those kind of players on their football team, and I don't see him on the board. Now, his agent's Drew Rosenhaus. His agent has a lot of work to do. I'm talking about Jalen Carter's agent is Drew Rosenhaus. He's got a lot of work to do. Jalen has to be as open and honest as possible in these interviews, and he cannot lie anymore about what happened that night and anything about the situation within the scope of what his lawyers and police and stuff allow him to say. But do I think he deserves a second chance? 100%. Do I think he made a mistake? 100%. Do I see the Chicago Bears drafting Jalen Carter? As we stand today, March 2nd, I think he is completely off their boards unless something drastic changes within the next couple of days to couple of weeks.
That's huge. And you said a lot about the situation. I'll speak to the character right now to lead off my take on this. And he is 21, right? And And what's unfortunate is that he was warned, and I was just reading about this, there was police body cam footage released yesterday when he received a warning from police when he was driving 89 in a 45 mile per hour speed limit zone. And again, this is pretty serious when law enforcement gets involved like that. And we know that, that this, again, he released that statement that I'm sure Rosenhaus had something to do with, where he wanted to be fully exonerated of any criminal wrongdoing. But it doesn't take away from the fact that he could face, I believe it's a maximum of 12 months in a prison if he gets convicted. And I'm sure that they'll probably do everything, knowing the NFL, knowing Rosenhaus and Carter's team, knowing that he could be in the top 5 of the draft. They'll try to sweep it under the rug and slap a fine on him, something like that, and he'll get away with it. Now, with the character issues, and I know Nomad, he always chimes in, he spoke that young men like this deserve second chances, and I'm all for that. And we've talked about Jalen Carter, how Mel Kiper may have dragged his name through the mud wrongfully. And we know that he's still maturing. When you are 21 years old, you and I could only imagine what he's going through, what his mindset is. It speaks a lot with his character to go back to the combine, right? So, whatever happens now, it's very early on. This is still breaking. We're figuring out what his punishment will ultimately be. But for him to fall off the Bears draft boards, and you talked about the past transgression for Bears players, just look at the Bears last offseason and guys like, I think it was Byron Pringle or one of the scrub wide receivers getting pulled over, is drunk driving, things like that. So it can happen. It just goes back to these guys should not be able to drive themselves, I feel like. And when alcohol is involved, and we know the situation with I'm forgetting the Raiders receiver who
Henry Ruggs,
who ultimately killed someone with his car in manslaughter and ruined his career. Yeah. So I mean, that's a little bit of a different situation, but to your point about him falling off the Bears draft board, with how deep this edge class is, and the Bears looking to get the best player available, it does make a lot of sense to say we're going to move on from Carter at this point. But it would not also surprise me if he does have these great workouts with the Bears for sure, and passes all of these physical requirements. And if this does get swept under the rug, then who's to say in the draft, he might jump right back up there. It could really impress them, especially we'll see, as we talk about in the next subject here, where the Bears will be sitting if they should be trading that number 1 overall pick. So let's switch focus to that. And in principle, I know Ross, we're both pretty convinced that this number 1 pick will be traded away. It's just a matter of what the haul is going to be and who it's going to be a trade with. And really, it's in principle spoken agreement. I think you said kind of the over under. If there will be an agreement in place, the question is by March 13th, right?
Yeah, and the reason why I put that out there, I was gonna say, the reason why I put that out there, Evan, is because we saw Ryan Poles yesterday talk to the media, and he specifically said, when asked about this question, there are, when would you think about trading this pick? And he said there are going to be plenty of scenarios on the board where I can trade this pick for draft picks and veteran football players. And he said, I would like to do that sooner than later, particularly because March 13th is when free agency starts. So if he gets a couple of veteran players, back in a trade, then he does not need to address that in the draft. I'm thinking about one team in particular that comes to mind for this exact situation that we can kind of talk about a little bit. But and so that's why I set the date at March 13th. It would be the soonest a first overall pick has been traded. But I think if a guy is looking at getting veteran players back in a trade, then you have to set that over-under date right at the day of when free agency starts.
Yeah, I get that completely, especially with that deadline. And in principle, again, I think spoken agreement, whatever you want to call it, the Bears will be ready to deal that number 1 pick to another team by that time. Will the team announce it? I don't think so. What do you say, Ross?
Yeah, I mean, depends. So, I mean, here's what comes to my mind, right? As soon as he said that yesterday, I think of one team in particular, and I think it's the Carolina Panthers. I think the Carolina Panthers, new head coach is Frank Reich. Frank Reich is tired of retread players, of retread quarterbacks, And I think they desperately want a quarterback in that situation. I think Jake Tepper is their owner, and he's a head funds guy. He's a guy that's a mover and shaker in his world. I think he wants to make a big splash. What better way than trade up for the first overall pick? And in my eyes, I think that the Carolina Panthers can trade their pick. I think they're at number 9 overall. Don't quote me on that exactly. I know Dan can do some checking on that for us. But they're somewhere around 9th overall. So in my mind, I think that the Panthers can put that pick on the table. I think they can potentially put a second round pick this year, or maybe a future first round pick next year. And I think the veteran football player that could come back is Brian Burns, who's a 25-year-old outstanding edge rusher. But he needs to get paid really soon. And I don't know if he fits the Carolina Panthers timeline. The Bears have a ton of cap space, and they would have no problem giving him $100 million contract. And then you solve 2 needs, right? You got your young edge rusher and Brian Burns. Thank you for that. They are the number 9 pick. You got your young edge rusher in Brian Burns that you covet. He is an elite player that you already know is damn good. You've got the money to pay him. And then you drop back to number 9, and you can address offensive tackle at that position, or you can address wide receiver at that position, and you can still have a couple more picks. And I think that's a very real scenario that's on the table. And if that is on the table, I think that happens right before free agency starts.
It's interesting. I could see that certainly, but I just think in my bones, I feel it that they would not be announcing anything by free agency start. As far as prospects go, Ross, if this does not happen, if it's, say a trade with the Colts and trading back out of that number 1 pick, and there's the chance that they trade with a couple teams to, amass more picks, but still stay in the top 10. What do you think in edgewise? And we know the combine's going on right now. We know Will Anderson is still going to be really high on the Bears draft board, but obviously there's other guys out there that are working out as we speak, like Tyree Wilson. Everybody's loving Lucas Van Ness, whose nickname is Hercules, and he certainly looks like it, from Iowa. Loving him. What else?
Yeah, I think right now, if we're looking at the Bears' big board, I think Jalen Carter obviously has dropped down quite a bit. And I think Will Anderson sits atop their big board right now. He just ran their 40 time right in front of me. He ran about a 4.69 on his first run. We'll see what he does on the second run. This kid's going to test off the charts. He's got long arms. He's an absolute freak of an athlete. And he's got stats to back it up. And he comes from a pedigree program like Alabama, where we know they pump out amazing defensive football players, right? And then Tyree Wilson, he's got a little bit of a foot injury that he's still dealing with right now, but he'll be okay in a couple weeks. So he's not going to test this weekend, but he's definitely going to sit down with the Bears. He's going to interview with them. He's going to talk with them, and then they'll be at his pro day and personal workouts and stuff like that. And those 2 guys right now are sitting at the top of the Bears' big board with the Jalen Carter news. And then you hit it on the head. The young man from Purdue, he's got to be rising. He looks like a Bears football player, right? Lucas Van Ness. He is a massive human being. And I know a lot of people have thought about kicking him inside, but I think that power that he has, you want to keep that kind of talent outside. But he is just a mammoth of a football player, and he can really cause some issues. But we keep talking about defense, and I think what the Jalen Carter situation does is it potentially drops the Bears down even further, and to get an even bigger haul and say, you know what, we don't even have to address defense right now. And I think a wide receiver is a very realistic possibility. I heard I heard Matt Eberflus talk yesterday, and he brought up specifically the wide receiver position, and he brought up specifically the remaining 4 teams that were in the playoffs this year all had dominant number 1 wide receivers. And he looks at his roster, and he doesn't see that on his roster. He knows that. And he says, we need a game changer at that position. Well, guess what? Quentin Johnson is probably going to be a game changer at that position. He's going to test, absolutely off the charts, right? Jordan Addison might be that guy. Jackson Smith Enigma, who is a Justin Fields favorite, the Iowa State guy, is going to be there. And then a favorite of mine is Zay Flowers from Boston College. I'm a huge Zay Flowers fan. I think that he's going to be a superstar in this league. So the Bears could drop even further in the first round, get a massive haul to fill out their roster and still take one of these stud wide receivers. There's still a lot on the board here and a lot to figure out.
Yeah, not sure if they're obviously getting a Quentin Johnston or Jordan Addison or even Jackson Smith and Jigba, unless you're really reaching, or, again, it could all shake out where maybe the Bears get a couple picks in that first round. It's not out of the realm of possibility. But there's no question that offensively they have a lot of needs as well. So at this point, you think, Ross, with the Colts and everything that's been said by their leadership right now too, and supposedly tipping their hand and trying to trade up to number one and saying you don't necessarily need to trade up to get a Bryce Young like that. Do you think they're still in play with the Bears to potentially move up and get that number one pick?
100%, because I know Chris Ballard is playing poker right now, and he's trying to not show that he what cards he has when the flop shows up. But as long as his owner is Jim Irsay, I don't believe anything that Chris Ballard says. I think Jim Irsay runs that show, and he's going to tell you if they want to go up and get the first overall pick, that is Jim Irsay's call. I do think that it is still very much on the table that the Houston Texans just go ahead and go up to that, and the Bears are content with being a number two, which is okay, right? Because a possibility, I don't think this has been discussed enough, is the Bears and the Texans just flip-flop, right? 1 and 2. And then maybe what the Texans have to do as a little bit of a premium is they have to give up that 12th overall pick. And then maybe the Bears will kick back like a third round pick. And I think that's kind of a fair trade-off for both teams. And then all of a sudden you can get your Will Anderson, your stud, offensive, edge player. And then around 12th overall, you can look at that wide receiver or that offensive tackle like Peter Skoronski from Northwestern. So there's a lot out there. I don't envy Ryan Poles in this situation because he has to sift through a lot of the bullshit. He has to sift through a lot of offers, and he has to make a franchise changing position. Franchise changing move here. So there's a lot out there. But I think that the Texans and the Colts are very much in play. But as we know, every year there's a dark horse, right? We didn't know that one year that the 49ers were going to trade all the way up to go get Trey Lance, and the Chiefs were able to move up to get Pat Mahomes. We didn't even know the Bears were going to move up to get Mitchell Trubisky. So, there feels like there is a Panthers dark horse out there. There is certainly a Raiders dark horse out there. They kind of came out this week and said, we're not really interested in Aaron Rodgers. That might be smoke screen. And then there's a Falcons team out there as well that I think that could potentially move up to the Bears at first overall.
Yeah, and we don't really know. I think Ryan Poles and Matt Eberflus are obviously not trying to tip their hand at this point, even though they're talking to media and figuring it out themselves because there's so many possibilities out there. But I know Ryan Poles said, quote, "I don't think you can get enough face-to-face time getting to know them, what they're about, some of the things that they've gone through in both their life and football life to show that they have the resilience to play in this league," talking about prospects at the combine and beyond, especially with whatever pick they happen to get in that first round, if it shakes out like that. And what was interesting was them talking about a competitive edge, was to see who has the competitive edge, certain prospects having them play games like putt-putt or mini golf. And Ross, my question to you, of course, is which would you rather play? Which do you think you could beat me in handily?
Yeah, they were doing like putt-putt or darts, right? I'm certainly more of a putt-putt guy. I love miniature golf. I love miniature golf more than like bowling or playing pool. So that would be my bet. I think I could beat you in that. Darts, it gets a little tricky, especially after you've had a couple beers, couple shots. That board, you start doing the one eye thing. You don't know what the hell's going on. I'm not really a big fan of darts, but putt-putt all day.
He's going putt-putt.
Yep.
I went on a darts streak last month for a hot second where I got pretty good, but mini golf it could also go either way. We talked about the Bears at length, Ross, and obviously there's a lot to look forward to with the combine happening right now and into this weekend in Indy. But with the top quarterback prospects is CJ Stroud and Bryce Young, and We know that Levis, Levi's, whatever. He's also starting to get up there in the conversation for one of those top picks. But has there been any movement for you? Do you think you have any more predictions going into the combine and beyond?
No, I mean, I'm excited to see the running backs this weekend because I think it's a very deep running back class, and I think that the Bears could also be in the market for a running back in this draft. I think the
Oh
next
yeah,
big story of this combine weekend is what the hell is Bryce Young gonna weigh? So, I mean, you've obviously stood next to me many times, right?
yep.
I am 5'10", 185 pounds. I am theoretically the size of Bryce Young. Do you think that I could stand up in an NFL pocket and take a beating back there? Dropping back 30 to 40 times a game.
I think you
Because
could.
you think so? Oh,
I think so. We're both built about the same way. Yeah, sure.
yeah, you're a
I
little
mean, you
taller
look
than
at
you're taller than me though.
yeah, look at CJ Stroud. He's got a little more weight than both of us, but about the same height. He's
Yeah,
doing fine for himself.
I look at a guy like Bryce Young, and God bless him. I wish him
He
nothing but
can't move
success.
like Bryce Young.
That's true. Yep, that's true. But I wish him nothing but the best. But I see a guy that is basically the same height and the same weight as me, and I start to get super worried about how he's going to be able to hold up long term in the NFL. And his weight this weekend is going to be all the talk in the world. I can guarantee you, he's going to spend the next 48 hours chugging as much water as he can to try and get that weight as close to 200 pounds as possible. And he'll piss it all out on Sunday and Monday. And I think his real weight is going to be anywhere between 185 and 190, which is slight. That's we've never seen a
That's
quarterback that
sure.
small before. You know, we've seen guys that short. Russell Wilson is that short. So is Kyler Murray. But those guys are 200 pounds plus. They're very stocky guys, especially in their lower body. And we've seen already pictures and stuff from Bryce Young this weekend. He looks all of 185, 190 pounds. So we're going to see if that scares teams or not, or if that still keeps him at the first quarterback taken in this draft.
Well, even the height's an issue, right? There's talk that he might be under 6 feet, and that's usually I feel like a death sentence for these quarterbacks out there. But coming from that winning program, it says a lot. And I think you're right on with him trying to beef up his weight right there. I just looked at a comp like Lamar Jackson is 6'2" and
Mhm.
212 and running all over the place. But these guys who are smaller, I mean, you better be able to run fast. Otherwise, that first year is going to be really tough for you if you go to Houston, you're going to take your licks. That's for
Mhm.
sure.
Mhm.
Anything else from the combine you're looking forward to this weekend? And you think any of these records going to be broken? Anything like that?
I don't think so. I don't think we have any of those speed demons that we've seen in the past. And
No.
quite frankly, those guys don't really do well at the next level, right? I mean, you still holding on to John
True.
Rostock from a couple years ago, the Cincinnati Bengals wide receiver that broke all the records and got his own shoes and stuff like that, right? I mean, we've seen now in the NFL, like the fastest wide receivers don't mean that they're the best wide receivers. So I think the Rutgers are going to be able to hold up this one. You're just looking at the unique athletes and the guys that are going to be able to test well, and I think it's more about the fodder and stuff like that too, and how these guys are going to how these guys are going to perform in front of teams between the ears in the classroom and stuff like that. So. I know Doug Flutie's up there. It's a much different game from when Doug played. These guys are bigger, stronger, faster than ever, and they don't hit like they don't hit like Doug hit back in the day in terms of illegal hits. They do protect the quarterback more, but it's a different kind of athlete. When you got Will Anderson coming down at you, who's in your exact draft, former teammate Bryce Young, better pray because he's
Yeah.
slight. But I enjoy it. I'm just happy that the off season is here, and we can get through this combine, and then hopefully from there, we're just about 2 weeks away from free agency, and that's when things really get interesting. And so we're kicking in the high gear. Obviously, the NFL is a year round sport at this point, and it's just happy to see it all unfold.
Yeah, no question. Talking about guys with records at the combine, I think he had the longest broad jump was Byron Jones.
Yeah.
And he was talking about a sort of cautionary tale for all these young guys. He said, quote, much has changed in 8 years. Today, I can't run or jump because of my injuries sustained playing this game. Do not take the pills they give you. Do not take the injections they give you. if you absolutely must, consult an outside doctor to learn the long-term implications. It was
Mhm.
an honor and privilege to play in the NFL, but it came at a regrettable cost I did not foresee. In my opinion, no amount of professional success or financial gain is worth avoidable chronic pain and disabilities. Godspeed to the draft class of 2023. That's well said, though, man. You know what you're getting into, these young men.
Yeah, it gets morbid, right? He was one of the best athletes that we've ever
Absolutely.
seen come out in the NFL draft, and for it to be done that quickly, and then him to be in pain and say he can't do
Yeah,
the things that he used to do just a couple of years ago, it shows you the behind the curtain stuff of this league, right? And we love it, and we
right.
love the sports, and it's a moneymaker and stuff like that. But these guys go through a lot of pain and trials and tribulations just to get on the field week after week. And kind of like you said, there's a lot of dirty stuff behind the scenes that players agree to in the moment, and then regret at the end of it. And so you just wish you have to remember all these guys are human beings, and you wish them best, nothing but the best in their quality of health going forward. I just saw also yesterday his name is escaping me right now, but the very first black ex-player to do the sideline stuff, he just got diagnosed with CTE, and so that was kind of things were just like, it hurts, man. It hurts to see, and that's why it's a tough game, and you hope that these guys can get out with some semblance of quality of health.
Absolutely. That's why you're seeing so many guys retiring like right at 30 at this
Sure,
point, too,
sure.
regardless of position, whether it be linebacker or running back, because they're, like Byron Jones. The game takes its toll even in a short amount of time.
Mhm.
Let's pivot over to spring training, Ross. Baseball's back, at least in sunny Arizona. I'd like to go to spring training. Have you been before?
I've never been before. It's been on my list.
Go.
Something I thought about doing. The World Baseball Classic is coming up, and I proudly represent Team Puerto Rico, and I was able to do that once in Puerto Rico. That's a lot of fun, and so they've got some games
That
this
sounds like a
year
blast.
throughout the world. That would be a fun game too, is see like a USA versus Dominican Republic game or something like that, right? All the all-stars. I love when they do the World Baseball Classic. I wish they did it more frequently because it's a lot of fun.
Yeah. So spring training going on right now. I would like to go to Arizona just because it looks like such a great party and a nice
Mhm.
excuse to get away from the Midwest for a little while. But spring training at this point is what it is. But now the big storyline is to speed up the game and to improve the game, to improve the product that Rob Manfred, the MLB commissioner, is putting out there. They're instituting the pitch clock is probably the biggest change right now, the biggest
Mhm.
adjustment, where it's 15 seconds if there's no one on base, 20
Mhm.
seconds if there are runners on base.
Mhm.
And to me, that's been a long time coming when you are the only North American professional sport that hasn't had a clock and has dragged on and on, and all these players have taken their sweet ass time for as long as we can remember, whether it be pitchers or hitters or anything like this. Where now they're trying to speed it up, and maybe this goes back to the um, I don't know, the whole appeal of baseball and viewership. It all comes back to ratings and making money with the sport too. But it has been a long time coming. But even more interesting for this season is the MLB, banning extreme defensive shifts, making the bases bigger. So in theory, encouraging players to steal bases more because you take about 4.5 inches between the bases. It's that
Mhm.
that much shorter, so they have,
Mhm.
in theory, can get there faster. That's a huge adjustment for players that were able to take their time. And if you're not in the batter's box by 8 seconds left in the pitch clock, it's an automatic strike, which we saw earlier. That Braves game where it was bases loaded, and then just really took the whole any drama out of it, really. And then the pitcher's getting charged a ball if the clock expires before they throw a pitch. They're even limiting pickoff attempts to 3.
Mhm. Mhm.
Let's start with the pitch count. How do you think it's going, and are you for it, Ross?
I'm completely for it. I mean, it's about time that baseball brought this sport into the 21st century, right? So, I mean, all these rules are going to shave off about 20 to 30 minutes off a baseball game, and sometimes you get 3.5 hour baseball games. If you can cut that thing down to 2.5 hours, that's perfect. I mean, now you're coming in about the average time of an NBA game, which is essentially what you're doing. You're trying to appeal to a younger crowd, but it's like, nobody has time to watch a baseball game that starts at 7 p.m. and stay up until 10:30 at night to, during the week to watch a game. I want to watch this thing and let's get it done by 9:30. I love it. I would, there's a Twitter account called Pitch Ninja, and they did a side by side. They did a Zach Greinke. He threw 2 pitches. It was a playoff game. He throws 2 pitches and did the side by side comparison. And they ran last year's entire Kentucky Derby in the time that it took him to throw 2 effing pitches. And I was like, you got to be kidding me.
It's unacceptable.
What are we doing here? Why does, who wants to see that? Who wants to see you step in a box, step out of box, grab your nuts, spit, step in again, step out, pitcher steps off the mound, catcher comes out, and then all of a sudden 3 minutes later we see another pitch? It's absolutely insane. I'm a baseball purist. I love baseball to the fullest, but they had to do these things to bring this game into the 21st century. And then when you look at the stars of the sport, to me, most of them are on the West Coast. Shohei Ohtani, Manny Machado, Mookie Betts, right? Like a lot of these guys on the West Coast. And imagine if you're in New York or in Boston or something like that, you can't ever see these guys play because they don't start their games until 10 o'clock at night. And at least now you can maybe see Shohei Ohtani pitch for like 5 innings in an hour and 15 minutes, something like that. You can at least see him play, and that's going to drum up some more interest for some of these stars in the league. So I love it. I think it's going to suck for the beer vendors at the games because they're going to get about 30 to 45 minutes less of beer sales, but it's absolutely necessary if we're trying to get more people to watch this game. And it's going to force you to for me, I always call baseball, folding clothes, sport, or like scrolling through like Instagram sport. And I think now it's going to force you to really pay attention more because these pitches are becoming fast and furious, and the ball's going to be put in play. There's no shift to take away hits, right? And the guy's going to be stealing more bases. There's going to be more action, and that's exactly what we want. And I'm looking forward to it. I'm actually looking forward to watching baseball this year, not only the White Sox, as I'm a huge fan of the White Sox, but just more baseball games in general, and see more of the sport now that I don't have to commit 3.5 hours to a game.
It picks up the pace significantly. And what do you think about those other rule changes? I think, certainly we can agree on the pitch clock being a long time coming, compared to a shot clock, compared to the play clock for football, whatever. But it's interesting that enlarging the bases by about 3 inches or whatever to encourage stealing and then the defensive shifts. I know that you can't challenge, the play clock, but you can challenge the shift rule. Right. But yeah, it's crazy. It's a lot of rules to roll out at one time.
It was necessary. It had to be done. I think it's going to be, I think you're going to see a lot of upset players the first month of the season, but guess what? They'll adjust. They'll get on accordingly. And I think by the time we hit June, it's going to be a lot of fun. I think people are going to be really enjoying it. And I think it's going to bring people out more to the ballparks, knowing that they can kind of get in and out in an orderly fashion. And I can't wait to see it. I think it's going to improve the sport. I can't wait to watch the product on I was a big fan of watching the games on Apple TV last year. I thought it looked amazing. I thought they had cool graphics and stuff like that. This is what you have to do. The sport should be appealing to kids that are scrolling through TikTok all day and on Instagram and play games on iPads and stuff like that. You've got to start to bring down the median age of the fan of your sport. And I started watching baseball and I was like 6, 7 years old. My son's 6 right now. He'll be 7 this year. He don't give a shit about baseball. He plays T-ball. He enjoys T-ball, but he doesn't know who Mike Trout is or anybody like that. And I think hopefully this will get him to be more interested in the game going forward. So I'm all in.
The shorter, the better. Get in, get out. That's what ultimately is going to appeal to not only these younger generations, but folks that want to get the most out of their day. So as you led off the conversation with Ross, how you can trim 20-ish minutes, maybe more off a game like that. I mean, the beer vendors, it sucks, but people start drinking faster too. Who knows?
That's true.
Help out.
That's true.
That's for sure.
NASCAR and beers.
Yeah, absolutely. So, unfortunately, the bad news for the Blackhawks is you see the Patrick Kane jersey behind me. I'm off to the game tonight where there will be no Patrick Kane. It's a fucking fire sale with the Blackhawks, but sadly the Kaner, the chosen one for the Blackhawks, who brought them back out of anonymity, is unfortunately gone to the Rangers. And all you can say is thank you. And it's going to be quite a scene tonight at the United Center as they're doing a tribute. I'm helping roll out a banner with some friends that says thank you 88. That'll be cool. So look for me. But what can you say about his accomplishments? And obviously 3 Stanley Cups stands out in that team that has between him and Taves and the rest of those squads in the mid 2010s, where they were so dominant and delivered performance after performance. And, you know, at the same time, where early in his career, we had Derrick Rose, and they're both my age. They're 34, 35 right now.
Mm-hmm.
And just at the prime of their careers, and what Kane was able to do on the ice, they called him Showtime for a reason, because he was just electric. And I can remember just so many times him just juking out goalies and made me that much more interested in hockey. It helped when the Blackhawks are good and being able to make those 3 Stanley Cup runs. But what an incredible athlete. And certainly when you think about his legacy in Chicago sports, it's a fickle sports town. He's arguably on that Mount Rushmore between, you know, him and Jordan. You might put Walter Payton and you know, either a Cub or a White Sox player up there. It's very tough to say, but certainly you'd have to say probably the best Blackhawk of all time. But kudos to him on a great career. And it sucks that the Blackhawks had to trade him for picks is the way they thought they did. But it's a sign of the abyss now, and having to rebuild where Taves is the only one now and he's injured. So that's very tough, but thank you to 88 for sure. It was quite a ride that he took us on, and now he plays for fucking New York. Terrible.
Yeah, it was an amazing ride. I mean, listen, I think we can all remember those Cups runs back, you know, close to 10 years ago is when it started, or over 10 years ago is when it started. And he really, you know, Chicago, let's be honest, Chicago did not care about hockey until Kane, Taves, and Keith and Seabrook and those guys came along, and they ushered in. They made hockey cool and fun, exciting in Chicago. The bars were rocking on Madison Street and all throughout Chicago, well into the summertime as they made those long Stanley Cup runs. And it was fun. I agree with you. You know, it's probably him and like Stan Musial that are. I'm sorry, Stan, one of the Stans, or one of the you know, the best Blackhawks of all time. And for me, within the last like 25 years, it's like Kane and Taves and like Derrick Rose are arguably, and probably like Chris Bryant or something like that, are one of the most popular athletes in Chicago land over the last, you know, 15 to 20 years. And so, you know, thank you to him. I'll never forget watching that goal live, the first Stanley Cup win, right, where we didn't even know that it went in, and he started celebrating before anybody else. And you know, it was absolutely awesome. So, you know, thank you for him. I'm pretty sure that he will come back to the Blackhawks in some capacity sooner than later. But, you know, at the same time of the day, this is what happens in sports, right? Nothing lasts forever. This is a business. The Blackhawks have inevitably had to hit the reset button. And let's hope that, you know, for the fans' sake and for the team, that they can get back on top by retooling through the draft and getting prospects and stuff like that. And, you know, it starts with obviously finishing off this tank job and getting as close to the number 1 pick as possible this season, so they can get some young talent in there and reset this whole thing. Because unfortunately in sports, you know, dynasties don't last forever, right? But at least the Banners do.
Absolutely. And his legacy is up there in the United Center. It's solidified there, and it's weird to see him in another jersey, but this happens, and better to get what you can for him now, I feel like, than just hold on to a guy who doesn't really fit into the mold going forward. When you think about rebuilding this franchise and then trying to get back to that success of the 2010s. So we wish him all the best. There'll be quite a scene at the Madhouse this evening. Yeah, that was insane against the Flyers, that first Stanley Cup. I remember exactly where I was, just having beer poured on me at Duffy's. Good times. Yep. And to cap off the show, because I got to run out early, we're going to our honor of Creed, our top 5 sports movies, which is an impossible task, Ross. Yes. This is such a list. Ross, I know all 5 of your entries are White Men Can't Jump. Ross is the number 1 White Men Can't Jump fan that I know.
It was actually going to be Cool Runnings, the Jamaican bobsled movie. And
man,
and Seabiscuit.
Seabiscuit's great. Come on. Toby
Seabiscuit.
Maguire.
Yeah. No. I'll kick this thing off.
Go ahead.
My number five. I'm a purist in this state. We just talked about baseball and how beautiful a sport it is and tradition, and so I have to put Field of Dreams on the list. It's just absolutely awesome. You got the Black Sox, you got Ray Liotta in the movie with Kevin R.I.P. Ray Liotta, by the way, Kevin Costner, James Earl Jones, and just the back and forth. If you're a dad, it hits really close to home to you. It's a perfect dad movie. And shout out to the White Sox, of course, that played the Yankees in that Field of Dreams Park a couple of years ago. And what an amazing moment that was. But Field of Dreams is my number five. It is still classic to me.
It's insane too, alone how Kevin Costner was just the GOAT of sports movies for a while there. I feel like he was just crushing it.
Yeah, Bull Durham is
number five for me. Yeah, for sure. He's got some great ones. Friday Night Lights is number five for me, and you take it back to Texas high school football. Billy Bob Thornton as the head coach of this scrappy team, and the whole atmosphere around high school football in Texas is just otherworldly. And I remember seeing that with my high school freshman football team. We all saw it in theaters, and it was great. And spoiler alert, it doesn't have a fairy tale ending with a lot of these, where you go up against these titans of Texas football, in the 8A championships, and you get beat, unfortunately, in the championship game. But it had great side stories. Booby Miles, who could throw, he could catch, he could paint the fence, he could walk your dog all before the sun sets, as his uncle or his dad was saying. And it was a great cast of young characters. And Billy Bob, that's one of those underrated roles for him, I would say, as the head coach. And that's number five for me, Friday Night Lights.
That's right. You want to win? Put Booby in, is what he would say, right?
Number four for you, Ross.
Your number five is my number one, actually. So we knocked that right out the park. I love Friday Night Lights, my favorite sports movie of all time. I think it's as realistic as it gets in terms of depicting football and college football, high school football, in particular, in that kind of old 80s zone in Texas. My number four is a Spike Lee movie, and I think it's a Spike Lee movie that does not get enough credit. It is He Got Game. It is an outstanding performance by Denzel Washington, who plays a father who is let out for a couple of days to try and convince his son to go to the Warden's college that he went to. His son is played by Ray Allen, who was a superstar at the time. Little known fact, every other player on Ray Allen's high school team in that movie also went up for that role, the NBA players, and they didn't get it, so they ended up being on his team. You got guys like Walter McCarthy on there and John Williams and stuff like that. It's just an outstanding movie. I think it's fantastic. I think the last 25 to 30 minutes are just mind-blowing of a film. And, it's also very loosely based off of, do you know what NBA player? Stephon Marbury, who was also a Coney Island legend. And that's what kind of Spike Lee based it on. So that's my number four.
That's great. Love that choice there. Number four for me is Hoosiers, keeping in the basketball theme, Gene Hackman and the underdog story, and Indiana hoops. I love Hoosiers. We're running out of time. So go to your number three, Ross.
My number three is it's Raging Bull. It's Raging Bull. Listen, I got to put a boxing movie on there.
We got the same.
Got to put a Scorsese movie on there. You can't go wrong with Raging Bull.
Raging Bull, fantastic. Some of De Niro's best work, and incredible with him across Joe Pesci. Great soundtrack, and the black and white just felt very appropriate for it. And the story of Jake LaMotta is just so crazy, and just ups and downs of it. It's wild. If you haven't seen it, you're losing, man. So that's number three for me as well. What's number two for you, Ross?
Number two for me is a Chicago documentary. It's Hoop Dreams. It's one of the best documentaries you've ever seen in your life, about two young men from the Chicago area trying to just make it out the hood. If you've never seen Hoop Dreams, please find it. Please stream it. It is absolutely outstanding.
considering docs. But number 2 for me was Remember the Titans. And I love the story. Love, obviously, the cast led by Denzel. And there's so many great young actors. A young Ryan Gosling in there. And, you know, what it's, of course, rewatching The Wire. Avon's in there, Avon Barksdale. So that's really a great soundtrack. It's very good about narrating the time that it was in and race relations and everything that went into it. And just a great story overall. Young Hayden Panettiere. That's great. Denzel at his finest too. Absolutely. That's number 2 for me. Number 1 for you, Ross.
It was, we said it already. It was your number 5. It was Friday Night Lights. So that's my favorite sports movie of all time. I love it so much. Great cast. I love the fact that they didn't win it all at the end. It was as realistic as it gets. That Dallas Carter team that they played at the end still kind of gives you nightmares, but just an absolutely amazing moment. Absolutely amazing moment when Boobie Miles finds out, you know, in the car with his uncle that he can't play football again. It's like, how can you not tear up at that moment and feel something? And I just think it's excellent. And it's one of the few movies that actually translated to an amazing TV show. It's probably one of the 10 best TV shows of all time as well.
And oddly enough, I never did get into the TV show. That'll probably be on my watch list one of these days soon. But number 1 for me was Rocky, and set off, you know, the Creed franchise wouldn't be here without Rocky. And obviously Stallone set that off. And it's such a low budget movie. And I feel like, you know, it hasn't aged well for a lot of people, but the original was super low budget, just Stallone fucking working out and just being this underdog boxer going up against Apollo Creed. Great soundtrack, the true underdog story. What could you not like about it? Won the best picture, and I think it won best screenplay in that same year. Really great one. But that's a great list from both of us.
Absolutely, it is.
Too many to honorable mention too. I mean, The Fighter's great, The Wrestler, Dodgeball, everything in between. We could do a top 5 sports comedy movies, and we could also go on with that.
Shout out my king, Tom Cruise, Jerry Maguire. Absolutely.
All right. Jerry Maguire. All right, we shall wrap this up. Thanks to everybody for listening in. Thanks to all the barflies for commenting in the chats. If you missed any of the previous shows or any of this show, you could catch it on Spotify, iTunes, wherever you catch your media. Remember to like, subscribe, tell a friend or two. Remember, you can watch us live on YouTube every Thursday at 6 o'clock as well. Follow us on Twitter. Follow me at 311Mac. Follow Ross at Ross Reed. Follow Barroom Network at Barroom Network. Thanks to Mr. Shorty for directing tonight, and there is a new science fiction later on at 9 o'clock. If you want to get into that, for now, we say deuces. Be good to each other out there. So long, everybody.
Peace out.